old Hollywood's most well-endowed actresses. Do you remember when the theater lights dimmed, the newsreel rattled, and the whole room went quiet for the main feature? Back then, the studios didn't just sell stories. They sold silhouettes, hourglasses that could stop traffic and start headlines. The censors tried to tame desire. Publicists did the opposite. And behind every poster-perfect curve, there was a love life the cameras couldn't resist. Tonight, we're counting down old Hollywood's most famously well-endowed actresses, strictly through their romances and affairs. Not gossip for gossip's sake, but the way relationships, marriages, flings, on-set sparks, supercharged an image and reshaped a career. Some affairs were open secrets. Some were whispered. A few were staged as carefully as a studio still, but all of them helped build the myths we still recognize. Before we start, lock in your guess for number 1. Don't overthink it. Type the name you're sure tops the list. We'll see who calls it early. If curves made the posters, affairs kept the flashbulbs hot. If the studios thought they could script desire, then the women on this list proved desire can write its own ending. Number 12. Diana Dors, Britain's blonde bombshell who turned gossip into fuel. You remember that face in the late 50s papers? Smile like a marquee, curves that made London feel a bit more Hollywood. Diana Dors wasn't just Britain's Monroe, she was a strategist. First came Dennis Hamilton, the husband manager who treated publicity like oxygen. Lavish parties, accidental photo ops, whispers about guest lists. You and I both recall how those columns wrote themselves. The romance burned hot, but the business scorched, and Dors learned the price of playing big. Then Richard Dawson offered steadier ground. Home, kids, fewer stunts. For a while, the cameras calmed, but careers tugged in different directions, and normal life proved harder to headline. With Alan Lake, she found a love that felt fated and fiery. Devotion, jealousy, reconciliations. It was complicated, yes, but real, and the public couldn't look away. Through every chapter, Dors kept her ace, W-I-T. She could turn a barbed question into a laugh and a booking. The figure drew flashbulbs. The brain kept her booked. If Diana showed you can ride the rumor mill without letting it grind you down, then number 11 is the woman who wrote the playbook the censors couldn't quite stop. Number 11, Mae West, the curvy rebel who turned desire into dialogue. Before anyone called it bombshell, Mae West made it a business model. You remember the wink, the glide, the one-liners that slipped past the Hayes boys because she wrote them. The figure drew eyes, the pen made rules, and the love life? Spicy enough to keep columnists clocked in. There was the secret vaudeville marriage to Frank Wallace, buried for years, then dragged into daylight when Mae was already a sensation. It didn't rattle her, it fed the legend. She kept close a shrewd confidant manager, James Timoney, equal parts romance and strategy, while she muscled her way from burlesque to box office queen. Later, long after censors had tried to clip her, she chose a partner who fit the persona, Paul Novak. You remember him from her Vegas act, decades younger, loyal, built like a statue Mae might have ordered from Central Casting. Around her swirled whispers of prize fighters and musclemen. She never chased denial, only the next great entrance. Mae's gift was control. She didn't beg the press to behave. She gave them lines they couldn't resist, then cashed the curiosity. Curves were her calling card. Authorship was her armor. If Mae proved a woman could script her own desire, then number 10 shows what happens when the fantasy becomes a cage. The love goddess herself. Number 10, Rita Hayworth, the love goddess who paid for the fantasy. If you remember the 1940s glow of a big screen, you remember Gilda, the glove, the glance, the curves that made breath a luxury. The studio remade Margarita Cancino into Rita Hayworth, and the world fell in line. But the romances behind that poster-perfect image told a costlier story. With Orson Welles, it was wartime speed and artistic fire, magic on film, turbulence at home. She adored the genius. The genius kept drifting. Headlines wrote the breakup before the ink was dry. Then came Prince Ali Khan, a royal whirlwind, palaces, cameras, a princess fairy tale that couldn't outlast jealousy and public scrutiny. It It glittered. It cracked. Finally, Dick Hames brought storms she didn't deserve. Money troubles, courtroom scenes, and a woman the papers wouldn't leave alone. Through it all, Rita kept working, kept dazzling, and admitted the split between fantasy and flesh. Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me. The figure drew legends. The woman paid for them. If Rita showed how a myth can smother the heart that fuels it, then number 9 is the blonde who weaponized comparisons and refused to be anyone's second choice. Number 9, Mamie Van Doren, the third M, who turned comparisons into cash. You remember the label the papers loved, the 3 M's, Marilyn, Mansfield, and Mamie. Van Doren never pretended to be anyone's copy. She made the blonde bombshell game louder, cheekier, and a little dangerous. The romances kept the spotlight bright, starting with bandleader Ray Anthony, a headline marriage wrapped in moonlit parties and flashbulbs. For a time, they were the glossy couple everyone expected to see at the same table. Trumpet on stage, Mamie in a dress that did half the publicity for her. When it cracked, she didn't. She moved on, and the columns followed. Mamie understood what sold, flirtation that felt real, and stories the town would repeat. She later laid it all out in a candid memoir. Encounters with leading men, athletes, and chart toppers, part romance, part survival manual, for a woman who refused to be managed by anyone but herself. The figure drew comparisons. The personality ended them. She flirted with scandal, sure, but you could always sense she was steering the wheel, not riding shotgun. That's why she belongs here. Not only well-endowed, but well in command of the myth men tried to write for her. If Mamie weaponized comparison, then number 8 is the woman whose poster became an era and who spent years proving she was more than a calendar. Number 8, Raquel Welch, the poster that launched 1,000 headlines. You remember the photo. Fur bikini, fierce stare, every newsstand sold out. That image made Raquel a global shorthand for curves. But the love life behind it didn't behave like the tabloids wanted. She married her high school sweetheart, James Welch, before fame. A young, ordinary love that couldn't survive the rocket launch. With producer-manager Patrick Curtis, the romance and the brand were welded together. Publicity storms, red carpet choreography, a couple built to sell a myth. When that partnership ended, she chose quiet over frenzy. The third act was the French filmmaker André Weinfeld. Less flash, more companionship. The kind of marriage you and I know doesn't feed headline writers, but does steady a life. Years later came Richard Palmer, younger, bold, paparazzi catnip. Raquel smiled at the noise, then went right on setting boundaries. She kept saying what many didn't expect from a sex symbol. No on-set flings, no co-star chaos, the private life on her terms. Columns tried to pin rumors to her. She shook them off and made it clear that respect, not scandal, was the price of admission. That's why she belongs here. The poster sold a fantasy. Raquel negotiated the contract. The figure drew the camera. Her rules decided how close it could get. If Raquel proved a woman could outmaneuver the myth built around her, then number 7 is the star who didn't orbit Hollywood. She made Hollywood orbit her. Number 7, Gina Lollobrigida, La Lolo, the Planet Men, tried to orbit. You remember those kiosk covers? That smile, that jawline, a figure that made headlines feel small. They called her La Lolo because she didn't circle Hollywood. Hollywood circled her. The romances and near romances only fed the pool. She married Milko Skofic, the physician who became her manager, the man who moved mountains so the world could see what Italy already knew. For a while it worked. Home, a son, a career exploding on 2 continents, until the marriage strained under the velocity of fame and control. Across the ocean, Howard Hughes kept calling. He dangled contracts, courted hard, and, if you remember the columns, wouldn't stop proposing. Gina held her ground. She used the attention as leverage, not a lifeline, and refused to let a mogul write her ending. Studios tried to turn on-screen chemistry into off-screen rumors, especially with Rock Hudson, but she let the publicity swirl while staying decisively private. Later years brought a different kind of storm. The controversy with Javier Rigaud, decades younger, and that tangle of proxy marriage claims and court fights. She said she'd been deceived. He said otherwise. What cut through the noise was familiar. Gina asserting agency, demanding that her name and money belonged to her. The figure drew suitors. The will decided who stayed. If Gina proved fame has gravity, but she was the one setting the orbit, then number 6 is the fountain goddess who made the whole world stop mid-breath. Number 6, Anita Ekberg, the fountain goddess who turned Rome into a stage. You remember the moment. Midnight Rome, water whispering over stone, and Anita Ekberg stepping into the Trevi, like time had paused just to watch. That image made her eternal, but the love life behind it kept the columns busy. She'd arrived as Miss Sweden, statuesque and playful, and married British matinee idol Anthony Steele, a whirlwind match that the London papers practically lived inside. The glamour was real, so were the tempers and the tug-of-war with fame. When it cracked, Ekberg didn't wilt. She reset. Her second marriage to actor Rick Van Nutter was steadier. Work, travel, new starts. Yet the aura followed them from set to sidewalk. Paparazzi shadowed strolls. Restaurants went quiet when she walked in. Columnists tried to weld her on-screen chemistry to off-screen romance, especially after La Dolce Vita made her a continental myth. But Anita treated rumor like a passing breeze. She smiled, chose her table, and let the story float by. What made her belong here wasn't just proportion, it was command. She could be playful and untouchable in the same frame, letting suitors orbit while she decided who got close. The Trevi didn't make her a goddess. It revealed the one she already was. If Anita made a city hold its breath, then number 5 is the woman whose loves were earthquakes, headlines, diamonds, and a passion that refused to behave. Number 5, Elizabeth Taylor. Violet eyes, diamond headlines, and affairs that moved mountains. You remember the promise in those violet eyes, the kind that made an aisle go quiet. Elizabeth Taylor didn't just star in epics. Her romances became them. After The Whirlwind, with producer Mike Todd, ended in tragedy, the country watched her grief harden into defiance. That's when Eddie Fisher entered, America's crooner, still married to Debbie Reynolds. The public called it a betrayal. Liz called it life. The affair lit up every front page and turned her into something rarer than a star, a woman who refused to apologize for wanting what she wanted. Then came the earthquake. On the Cleopatra set, Taylor met Richard Burton, and the sparks outran the studio generators. The affair was so brazen, the Vatican scolded her in print. Paparazzi built an industry around two people who couldn't stay apart. They married, fought, laughed, worked, and bought diamonds large enough to name. 2 marriages, 2 divorces, a love that was part opera, part house fire. Through it all, Liz kept the upper hand more often than the columns admit. She leveraged scandal into leverage. Bigger salaries, better scripts, and an image that said, desire doesn't need permission. What made Taylor belong at the sharp end of any countdown isn't only proportion, it's power. She turned condemnation into currency and wrote her legend in headlines the studios couldn't control. You and I remember the shock. We also remember the grin that said she'd already priced the risk. If Elizabeth proved scandal could be strategy, then number 4 shows how restraint, cool, elegant, immovable, could be just as dangerous. Number 4, Sophia Loren. Elegance that turned pursuit into a choice. You remember the first time Sophia Loren swept onto an American screen? Calm, composed, every curve announcing that elegance could be dangerous. The romances behind that poise were the opposite of chaos. They were choices. At the center stood Carlo Ponti, the producer who spotted her at 15, shaped her early career, and became the great, complicated love of her life. Their bond had to thread a legal maze, annulments, citizenship changes, a remarriage, when the law finally caught up to the heart. But through every headline, she stayed immovably loyal. The gossip columns wanted scandal. Sophia offered commitment, then let the world argue with that. Temptation, of course, came dressed like a movie star. On set with Cary Grant, the chemistry was visible from the rafters. He was more than smitten. Letters, dinners, a gentleness that played like destiny. You and I remember those pieces, how the magazines floated the idea of a sudden proposal, how every public glance became evidence. But here's what made Loren different from the myths around her. She guarded her future as fiercely as the studios guarded her image. She weighed the man who had built a life with her against the man who could light up a room with a single smile. And she chose the life. The press kept the triangle alive for years. She closed it with a wedding band and a steady gaze. That's why her allure endures for our generation. The figure made her a poster. Principle made her a legend. The romance story wasn't about conquest. It was about sovereignty, of a woman deciding whose name she would carry and whose promises would outlast the cameras. If Loren proved that devotion can outshine desire, then number 3 is the brunette who turned a censorship scandal into star power and learned how to make the town stare on her terms. Number 3, Jayne Russell, the outlaw bombshell who outsmarted the Hayes office. You remember the posters before you ever saw the movie. A brunette in a peasant blouse. The censors couldn't stop glaring AT. The outlaw made Jayne Russell famous before it properly opened, and that was the trick. Howard Hughes pushed the envelope, measured the neckline, and baited the Hayes office into a fight. The town loves to tell the custom bra story. Jayne loved to say she ditched it and wore her own. Either way, the battle over her figure turned a quiet newcomer into a headline veteran. She learned early, if they're going to stare, make sure you decide how long. The romance story didn't run on scandal, it ran on staying power. She married Robert Waterfield, the Los Angeles Rams quarterback, and built a home life sturdy enough to withstand stadium noise and studio gossip. The columns tried to invent triangles, hues in the margins, producers in the shadows. But Jayne kept choosing the man she'd chosen. Their marriage rode out the years, the moves, the grind of 2 high-profile careers. When it finally ended, it wasn't a publicity stunt. It was life getting complicated in private. A second marriage to Roger Barrett read like a late-blooming happiness and ended in a shock no one could script. Later, with John Calvin Peoples, she found the quiet most stars say they want, but rarely reach. Through all of it, Jayne held the reins on her image. On screen, she could purr and smirk and flatten a room with a single look. Off screen, she made it clear she wasn't the character the studio advertised. She even stood beside Marilyn in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and proved there's more than one way to steal the same scene. What puts her this high isn't just proportion, it's poise. Jayne turned a censorship war into career fuel and refused to trade control for headlines. If Jayne mastered scandal without surrender, then number 2 is the blonde who turned scandal into stardom, America's most enduring myth. Number 2, Marilyn Monroe, the archetype who tried to own the myth. You remember how the room changed when Marilyn appeared. Soft voice, sly smile, a figure the studios treated like a gold mine. But the love life behind that glow was a tug of war between the woman and the myth. Before fame, there was the young, protective marriage to James Dougherty. Ordinary, almost anonymous. Stardom ended that. Then came Joe DiMaggio. America's gentleman slugger fell hard. Marilyn did too. The marriage was brief, bruised by jealousy, and the way cameras followed her like weather. Yet, even after the split, their tenderness lingered. You may recall the roses, the quiet loyalty that outlived the papers. With Arthur Miller, Marilyn reached for a different future, brains and ambition right beside beauty. She started Marilyn Monroe Productions, hunted for roles with bite, and tried to turn the bombshell into a businesswoman. But the marriage carried its own weight. Rewrites that cut too close, silences that stretched too long, and the feeling that the image she sold was drowning out the self she was building. The work soared, some like it hot, the home frayed. Then Yves Montand arrived, and the on-set electricity became a public confession. It was 1960, a married co-star, and a love that didn't bother to hide. His wife, Simone Signoret, handled it with worldly calm. The magazines did not. The affair burned bright and brief. Another reminder that Marilyn's heart wasn't a prop the studio could place where it liked. Around her swirled other whispers. Powerful men, late-night calls, names that became legend. Some were true, some were theater. All of it showed how desire, once unleashed, tries to claim the person who sparked it. Here's what our generation remembers, beyond the dress and the diamonds. Marilyn kept pushing for control of contracts, scripts, and the right to be taken seriously. The curves made her inescapable. The choices made her human. The tragedy is that the woman was still rewriting her story when the world closed the book. If Marilyn perfected the bombshell and fought to own it, then number one is the blonde who made the bombshell a full-time publicity machine and dared the town to look away. Number one, Jayne Mansfield, the PR earthquake who turned romance into a spotlight. If you remember the breathless late 50s columns, the playful oops necklines, the pink convertibles, the photo of Sophia Loren's famous side-eye, then you remember why Jayne sits at number one. Others had curves, Jayne turned them into a business plan. She didn't wait for studios to market her. She marketed herself. Press calls, timing, entrances engineered to make editors argue over which picture to run above the fold. The love life powered the machine. First came Paul Mansfield, the early marriage that gave her the name the world would chant. It was young, hopeful, almost ordinary, until stardom tore ordinary to pieces. Then the fairy tale years with Mickey Hargitay, the Mr. Universe who matched her spectacle watt for watt. You remember the photos, the gym poses, the nightclub billings, the sense that this wasn't just romance but a two-person brand. They could quarrel like thunder and make up like fireworks, and the town never got tired of watching. After Hargitay, Jayne married director Matt Cimber, chasing a steadier future that kept slipping through her fingers. The headlines didn't stop. They changed temperature. Enter Sam Brody, her pugnacious attorney companion, equal parts protector, provocation, and accelerant for columnists who'd already decided every night out was a story. It was messy, devoted, combustible. When the tragedy came on that dark Louisiana highway, it ended more than a life. It ended an era that had run on flashbulbs and nerve. Through it all, Jayne remained the author of her image. She understood angles, understood timing, understood that a neckline could be a press release. When protocol demanded demure, she chose audacious and made censors look like chaperones at the wrong dance. Publicists tried to imitate her. None matched her instinct for the moment that would travel. If a studio arranged a photo call, Jayne arranged a memory. Why number one? Because this list isn't just about proportion, it's about power. How romance, arranged or real, can supercharge a persona. Jayne's loves weren't footnotes to her figure. They were fuel for it. She turned private life into public leverage, then spent it on the roles, the shows, the headlines that kept her first in line when the cameras arrived. If Jayne proved you can turn desire into agency and make the town blink first, then the takeaway is simple. The image is only half the legend. The will behind it is what lasts. We watched these women light up the screen, and we watched their love lives light up the columns. Some romances were true and tender, some were stage managed. A few were fires no studio could put out. But the pattern is clear. Every great curve in old Hollywood came with a story. Marriages that moved money, flings that moved headlines, and choices that turned private desire into public power. Image got them noticed. The affairs kept the cameras coming back. If you remember seeing these faces in their moment, newsreel humming, theater dark, a whole row holding its breath, tell me your memory in the comments. Who did we rank too low? Who should be higher? And who did we miss entirely? Drop your top 3 in order, and don't be shy about the debates you remember from the papers. If the posters made them famous, then the relationships made them unforgettable. Next time, we'll flip the lens to the men, whose affairs bent studio rules and set off their own shock waves.